Over the last 2 videos, we looked at 7 beings from 4 ancient civilizations that had no meaningful contact with each other. Enki and Enlil from Sumeria, Thoth from Egypt, Hermes from Greece, Indra from the ancient Hindu Vedic tradition, Zeus from Greece, Odin from the Norse world. In every case, the same result. Same characteristics, same symbols, same role. Same relationship with humanity, described independently, written in different languages, carved in different materials, on different continents, across thousands of years. We've established the pattern. Now it's time to answer the question. What were they? Because I want to be clear about something before going any further. The answer to that question is not as simple as ancient mythology or ancient aliens. The truth, as best as we can reconstruct it with the evidence available, is stranger and more significant than either of those labels suggests. And by the end of this video, I think you'll understand why the ancient world remembered these beings the way it did. And we may be living in the moment where humanity is finally being forced to confront what our ancestors spent thousands of years trying to tell us. We'll start by stating the problem as clearly as possible, because it deserves to be stated clearly. Across the first 2 videos in this series, we documented the following. 7 divine figures from 4 major civilizations sharing identical characteristics in specific detail. Not broad thematic similarities, specific, precise, detailed correspondence across the following categories. Their role in the divine hierarchy, association with wisdom and knowledge, specific symbols including the serpent staff and lightning weapon, a specific relationship with humanity, including both creation and restriction, specific stories including the flood, the theft of divine knowledge, and the cosmic battle between order and chaos. The civilizations in question, Sumerian, Egyptian, Greek, Hindu Vedic, and Norse, developed their religious traditions during periods when meaningful cross-cultural contact between all 5 of them simultaneously was either non-existent or insufficient to explain this level of specific correspondence. Mainstream scholarship acknowledges the parallels. It does not deny them. What it disputes is the interpretation. The standard academic position is that these similarities reflect shared psychological archetypes, patterns built into human consciousness that express themselves similarly across cultures. The Skyfather, the Trickster, the Wisdom Keeper. Jung called them archetypes. Campbell called them the monomyth. The idea is that humans everywhere, facing the same existential questions, independently invent similar answers. And that is a serious, incredible position. And for broad thematic similarities, it is persuasive. But it does not explain the Vajra and the thunderbolt of Zeus being the same specific manufactured weapon described in identical terms. It does not explain Enki, Thoth, and Hermes all being associated with the same planet Mercury. It does not explain the flood story appearing in over 200 independent cultural traditions with the same structure and the same divine motivation. Archetypes explain themes. They do not explain this level of specific detail. So let's look at what does. There are 3 serious explanations for what we have documented in this series, and I want to lay out all 3 fairly, because intellectual honesty matters and because the evidence genuinely supports more than one interpretation. The first explanation is the archetype theory we just discussed. Shared human psychology producing similar mythological figures across cultures. This explains the flood patterns well. It struggles with the specific details. It is the mainstream academic position, and it should not be dismissed. The second explanation is a lost source civilization. The idea that there was a prior advanced civilization, predating all the cultures we know about, whose knowledge and traditions spread across the ancient world and seeded the mythological traditions we have been examining. Göbekli Tepe, which we have covered on this channel, is now dated to 9500 BC. That is thousands of years before any of the civilizations in this series. And it shows a level of organized cultural sophistication that should not have existed at that time. if a civilization existed before Göbekli Tepe, advanced enough to produce consistent mythology that spread across the ancient world, almost all of the parallels we have documented would be explained. One source, many traditions, one set of original beings described in many languages. This explanation is being taken seriously by a growing number of researchers, including some with conventional academic credentials. It doesn't require existence of extraterrestrial beings. It requires only that human history is older and more complex than our current model acknowledges. And a third explanation is something that we on this channel have been exploring across both of these last two series. That the beings described in these ancient traditions were real. Not human in the conventional sense, not divine in the theological sense, but real, physically present, interacting with ancient civilizations directly. And remembered across these civilizations as gods, because the people who encountered them had no other framework for understanding of what they were seeing. This is the ancient astronaut hypothesis in its most serious form, stripped of sensationalism and grounded in textual evidence, and it is the explanation that accounts most completely for the specific details that the archetype theory cannot explain. I'm not telling you which of these three is correct. What I am telling you is that the evidence we examined across this series is real. The parallels are real. And the question of what produced them deserves to be taken seriously regardless of which explanation you find the most persuasive. There's one characteristic shared by every being we've examined in this series that I've saved for this finale, because it's the most significant and the most consistent of all of them. Every single one of them is associated with forbidden knowledge. Not just wisdom, specifically knowledge that was given to humanity and then restricted. Knowledge that certain beings wanted humans to have, and other beings wanted to withhold. Knowledge that caused conflict with the divine hierarchy, specifically because of its relationship with humanity. Enki gives humanity the me, the divine laws of civilization, against Enlil's wishes. Thoth is the keeper of knowledge so powerful, it's stored in a hidden library accessible only to initiates. Hermes brings language and writing to humanity, gifts that other gods view with ambivalence. Prometheus steals fire, the symbol of technological and intellectual power, from Zeus specifically to give it to humans, and is eternally punished for doing so. Odin sacrifices his eye and hangs himself from the world tree for 9 days, paying an enormous personal price to acquire knowledge he then partially shares with humanity through the runes. In every tradition, there's a being who wants humanity to know more, and a being, usually the king of gods, who wants to limit what humanity can access. That structure, a conflict with the powerful hierarchy about how much knowledge humanity should be allowed, is not an archetype. It's a specific political situation, a specific disagreement, described in consistent terms across every tradition we've examined, and it maps with uncomfortable precision onto what UAP whistleblowers have been describing in congressional testimony since 2023. A small group of powerful individuals, a deliberate decision to limit what humanity is allowed to know, a conflict between those who want disclosure and those who want continued concealment. The same structure, 4,000 years apart. Let's be precise about this, because like I always say, precision matters, and specifically here more than anywhere else in this series. I'm not claiming that the beings described in ancient mythology are the same beings described in modern UAP testimony. That claim would go beyond what the evidence actually supports. What I am claiming is something more specific and more verifiable. The structural description matches. The ancient texts describe beings of extraordinary capability, far beyond human technology of the time, who arrived by means that the ancient observers could not explain, who interacted with humanity directly, who possessed knowledge and technology that appeared supernatural to those who witnessed it, who eventually withdrew from direct contact, becoming present but unseen, and around whom a deliberate effort was made to control and limit what ordinary people were allowed to know. The modern UAP testimony describes objects performing maneuvers that exceed any known human aerospace capability. retrieved craft and biological material being held in programs with no congressional oversight. A deliberate, multi-decade effort to conceal what was found. Witnesses describing a sense that something has been here, operating in our world, for far longer than the modern UAP phenomenon suggests. These two descriptions, separated by thousands of years, share the same structure. Now here's what I think is the most important thing I can say in this entire series. Whether or not the ancient gods and modern UAP are the same phenomenon, the fact that humanity has been asking this question for 4,000 years in itself is significant. The fact that our oldest written records contain detailed accounts of beings that sound remarkably like what decorated military officers are describing under oath before Congress, that is not nothing. Either we've been telling ourselves the same story for thousands of years because it is built into human psychology, or we've been telling ourselves the same story for thousands of years because the core of it is true. I want to close this series with an idea that I think is more radical than anything else we've covered. We treat mythology as fiction, as stories primitive people invented to explain things that they didn't understand. Thunder is Zeus being angry, the flood is a story about moral failure. The gods are projections of human psychology onto the modern world. That interpretation made sense in a world where we assumed ancient people were intellectually and culturally primitive, where we assumed civilization started recently and progressed in a straight line from simple to complex. Göbekli Tepe ended that assumption. The Sumerian text, with their specific, detailed, consistent accounts of beings and events, should reinforce that ending. What if mythology is not what we think it is? What if it is the oldest archive in human history? A record, imperfect, filtered through thousands of years of oral transmission, shaped by each culture's own language and values, of things that actually happened, of beings that were actually present, of events that were actually witnessed. The ancient people who recorded these accounts did not call them stories. They called them history, sacred history. The most important knowledge they possessed, worth carving into stone, worth writing on clay tablets, worth passing down through 100 generations. They believed they were recording something real. Maybe the most significant thing we do at this particular moment in history, when the question of whether we're alone is being forced into public consciousness by people with security clearances and congressional testimony, is take seriously the possibility that they were right. This series started with a simple observation. 3 gods from 3 cultures that never met, described identically. It ended with a question that I think is one of the most important questions of our time. If the most advanced civilizations in human history, across every continent and every era, all independently concluded that powerful non-human beings had interacted with humanity directly, gave us knowledge, restricted that knowledge, and then withdrew, what would it take for us to treat that consensus seriously? We may be living in a moment where that question stops becoming theoretical. Now, if you're just catching this video, this is the last part of this series. Go back and watch part 1 and 2. There's a playlist created for this. I'm going to link that in the description. I'm also going to link the Anunnaki playlist, which covers the first part of this if you want to dig deeper into the Anunnaki side. All of this stuff is connected. It's very interesting stuff. As always, I really do appreciate your investment in time and watching these videos. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. It really helps me out. Upcoming, we have a crazy series on the Vatican, so make sure you subscribe and you don't miss that. That's going to be coming very soon. Thank you all very much. I'll talk to you later.